Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Astral Traveler with Retta. Today we have a special guest, and before anything, I want to give you the call-in number. It's 347-996-5515. Again, 347 996 5515. And today we have a special guest, Mr. George Labono. He is an author and researcher, and the book he has available for free for a download is on AmericanMindBook.org, and it's called the Alien Mind. Again, Alien Mind, the Alien Mind. Hi, George.
Hi, how you doing? Yeah, it's on alienmindbook.org is the website if you wanted to.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
How are you?
Just fine, thanks.
Yes. And you also have a paperback version there too?
Yeah, and Kindle. Yeah, it's this book is a little bit different from the typical book you read on the subject, because most books start out and they'll talk about are UFOs and aliens real. Well, what my book does is it jumps in with the assumption that the evidence is already there, people assuming that aliens exist. And for people who are interested in, say, telepathy, astral travel, or astral out-of-body experiences, when you read my book, you'll be reading about how aliens apparently think that those subjects are it's a part of their regular life. This kind of remote communication, telepathy, it's the standard fare among them. So what the book does is it looks at the evidence that we have by contactees, abductees, whistleblowers, and actually in my own case, being a contactee since 1995, offering some insights about how aliens actually think. Not how we think about them, not how we assume they think, but how they actually think among themselves and what they might be thinking when they look at us, for example. Hello, Retta, you there? You hear me? Hello?
Retta?
Yeah, it looks like she dropped off the call right now. She's trying to connect again.
Okay.
I heard it sort of, cycling. Sort of cutting out.
Hey, Jay, does she have a landline she could call in from? Or maybe her daughter's cell phone or something?
She has her daughter's cell phone she can call from, but she don't. But see, the problem being in the house, it gets bad reception. That's what her problem is. Okay, you're talking about your perspective of the alien minds are like how aliens talk to their own race or other races.
Yeah, so well, I'll just kind of go on until she gets back on. Yeah, so essentially what the book does is, maybe you don't know this, but for some of the listeners, there's a satellite that just went up about maybe 18 months, 2 years ago. It's called the Kepler satellite. So the Kepler satellite went up, and it was looking for other planets out in space. And it looked at about 153,000 stars, looking for planets going in front of the stars to blink out the light a little bit. And it has found many planets, and they can also judge the gravity, the size, the orbit, and the Kepler findings. Now, this is new science suggests that as Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena suggests, it can be as many as it appears. There could be as many as 2 billion Earth-like planets in the Milky Way. Now, the Milky Way is one of billions of galaxies. It has about 150 billion or 200 billion stars, but imagine 2 billion of those not being Earth-sized. They're expected to be 40 billion, 50 or more billion Earth-sized planets in just this one galaxy, but out of those, 2 billion of them would be more or less potentially like Earth having possible life on them. And that's just the first estimate, and it's a good estimate based upon what's being seen. So that changes the whole sort of outlook. And, you know, in the past, you remember people would say, no way, aliens, Earth is the only planet that could have life. Well, that's not true at all. There are many planets that could have life, and it's so much and so many more that you probably remember Stephen Hawking coming out and saying, well, you know, if we do contact aliens, we might want to be careful because some of them may come in sort of like the Spanish conquistadors, you know, using an analogy, wanting to control everything in their own way and not really listening to us, the native peoples, in the analogy. So what's happened is that since Kepler, many astrophysicists, astronomers, scientists, they're talking more about not just the possibility of aliens, but what are we going to actually do when we encounter aliens? Well, if you've read about, know about the Roswell case, or if you know about alien contactees and stories of abduction, it's no longer a question of what we're going to do if and when. I mean, you may have seen photos, videos, and much more. Aliens appear to be visiting, and in my case, I might as well say I'm a contactee since 1995. And people might wonder, well, how did that happen? How did you know it was aliens? What happened? In my case, it's kind of remote kind of communication. Well, what happened was in 1995, you know, I consider myself a fairly smart person. You know, I went to college on an academic scholarship, but
Hey, George.
What happened? Yes.
Yeah, sorry, not to interrupt, but we're getting some messages in the chat room. Is there any way you can bump up the level on your microphone a little bit?
The volume a little more? Sure, yeah.
Yeah, a little more. I guess you're on a phone. Yeah, if we could get you a little louder.
A little louder. Okay. I'll talk a little closer like this.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so what happened was essentially contact began, and, you know, it was very different from, you know, I had personally been involved in human telepathic interactions. I knew how that went, although I wasn't, I guess you could say, an expert or all that good at it. And all of a sudden, it began in a way that where, you know, what happened was the contact was trying to show me what a fifth dimension would look like if it were modeled in a fourth dimensional space. You may know we have three dimensions. The fourth dimension is time. The fifth is kind of an extra deeper dimension. It's like hyperspace, as scientist Michio Kaku suggests. So what happened was that was suggested, and then much more. And, you know, I don't know if you know this or not, but when the human mind, when you're thinking in your brain, if you think words in your head, you may not realize it, but just by thinking words, psychologists have found that when you're thinking them, your vocal cords actually vibrate ever so slightly because the mind and the brain are not disconnected. They're always connected. The same is true if you're having or were to have telepathy with an alien. It wouldn't be disembodied. You wouldn't be unable to tell who or what or how they are because, again, it cycles through their body in the same way that you do yours. So you'll pick up little details of it. Some people think, oh, channeling, you know, something coming out of nowhere or like a disembodied spirit. That's not what telepathy is. Telepathy happens in real time, and it cycles into their body, their physiology. You hear a tenor in the same way you hear your own tenor in your own head. Obviously, it sounds different from what your recording sounds like, but you know what it is. And when someone else or if an alien entered into the mix, it's very different tenor, different physiology, and much more importantly, what I noticed was different ideas. It's as though their ideas would suspend 5 or 6 ideas all at once and resonate, in a sense, back and forth between those, talking about a lot more, communicating kind of faded, graphic ideas about, you know, science and space and other civilizations and their societies and more. Not just like a download, but hints and, you know, suggesting a little bit, expecting me to think more, which is essentially how aliens behave. In their education, they don't just tell you everything you want to know. They give you something to go on, and you're expected to think it through. And, you know, if they give you an idea that should suggest a lot of implications to you, you're expected to move with it. It's how education works. You can't just tell everybody A, B, C, and D expecting to memorize it. You have to provoke them to think, and that's what happened in my case. So it continued to develop. Is Retta on yet? Just checking. I guess not.
Not yet.
Okay, so you hearing me pretty good?
Well, we do have a call on 8.
Oh, gee, I don't know. You guys, you're kind of cutting out on your end from this
Should
end.
we try taking...
hear you fine, George.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me pretty good?
Yeah, I hear
Hello,
you
Retta?
fine. Yeah,
Oh,
I
okay.
hear you. I hear you loud and clear. I actually have a better connection than I did on the computer. I'm on the phone right now.
Oh, okay. So go ahead. So here I am. I was just talking about the Kepler satellite and how contact began in my case, and that's where I left off.
Oh, you could continue. And how did you? How I didn't hear that part. I'm sorry, but you can get into what made you write the book and.
Well, what made me write the book is that, of course, I had another book on an e-publications website, the publisher, and they asked me to critique a book about how aliens think. And I read the other author's book, and I'd already had been in contact ongoing for years. And I looked at his assertions that, aliens could never travel faster than the speed of light and so forth, and I was just astounded. I knew I could write a better book. So I did a book, and it became a bigger project, and well, you can imagine. I mean, if contact occurs in your life as it began in my life in 1995, you plunge into it. You want to know more. I started reading about it. I'd been through college, graduate school, and I have done work as an investigative researcher and a reporter, and so I wanted to know more. And I started, putting my notes together and reading other people, and came up with, a good basis for a book, and so I continued with it. I've had some people say, your book kind of rambles sometimes, and I do that on purpose because you can't just give somebody something that's totally otherworldly about how aliens think and their assumptions and their science, and then just like you left that, and that's all there is to it. I have to sort of cycle back into that a little bit and, show it in a different way. I'm actually writing another book now about how people can actually choose their own choice of alien contact. But if we go back to the level where, say, some people, well, they're not sure about aliens, whether they exist, the science is very interesting. The people are just amazingly credible. Some of the best people, best sources, and they're just, people, even military people, ranking people in government, scientists, and, astronauts, not the kind of people who would tell lies, nor the kind of people who would just throw away their careers if this was just a bunch of nonsense. And they're saying, yes, I saw this and that, and even, contact some cases. For example, Philip Corso, Colonel Corso, who wrote the book The Day After Roswell, based on his involvement in an Army and Pentagon project to copy alien technology, was saying that, the first Roswell alien, one of the injured aliens at Roswell in 1947, was communicating telepathically, and feelings and ideas. And what was interesting is that Corso said that they noticed that the Army scientists checked the brain waves of this alien, and the brain waves were communicating kind of it's called very low frequency. There's a very long wavelengths. And they felt that these frequencies were interacting with technology on board the alien ship. Well, what's interesting about those very long, low-frequency waves is that they can pass right through solids. A University of Chicago physicist was famous for discovering that, and of course that's now known. And those kind of wavelengths correspond, in our case, in our minds, to our kind of resting state. We have brain frequencies that go from like 5 to about 30 cycles per second, or the waves moving in that way. And in the low range, 5 to 11 cycles per second, those long frequencies go right through solids. So there you see the basis for at least part of telepathy, and for brainwaves that can go right through essentially your brain case and go out and travel across distances. But there's even more. There's a new basis in physics and science that I talk about in the book and in the next book that's much more interesting. And that is, Stephen Greer talks about it too. Other people are actually trying to educate people in this kind of remote sensing. Well, how it happens is this, and I'll have to tell you a little wee bit about science. Scientists now do this experiment where they take lasers or light waves and they point them directly at each other. And here you have one light wave coming in. Imagine sort of like a rolling snake hump with, troughs and crests. And it meets another light wave coming from the opposite direction in one single point. And they do that along 3 different sort of lines or axes. And the rolling hump in one wave meets the one coming from the other direction, where its rolling hump is exactly opposite, like a mirror image of the 2 waves. And they cancel out. People probably know what I mean by when waves cancel out. They're sort of The up of one wave meets the down of another wave. Well, when that happens, scientists, all they have to do is just vary the energy level or the voltage, and these waves create what are called standing waves. The energy, this can happen in your brain, this can happen in physics and technology, is looking for a place to go. And what it does is it sort of cycles down, like it goes down into the nucleus or in space, and it can resonate far out across great distances. So that Stephen Greer, for example, and aliens and myself, in my experience, suggest that what you can do is a telepathy or distant remote sensing, where you sort of converge energy in your brain, and it's cycling down into a deeper sense of, let's say, the nucleus or space, and you just contour that with the rest of your brain, and it resonates instantly across great distances. Sounds weird. I'm sure some people are thinking, no, wait, isn't there a speed of light limit?
Well, on this show, I teach a lot of people how to remote view and astral project. So you're just talking about your thoughts. Usually with remote viewing, I take my whole body there. But you're saying that you can also do that just not moving. You can just do it with your mind, where you don't have to take your spirit energy over there. You can kind of be like a receiver. Is that what you're trying to say?
No, I wouldn't say that at all. I'd say what you're saying is more exactly describes it. It's like you're really there, in a faded sort of a more refined way. Yeah, it's essentially you're there, and when you do this, it can be like your perspective shifts. Imagine, say, you're sort of converging energy in your mind. It's as though sort of it feels like the inner central parts of your brain are just sort of bending. The field effect goes a half flip and a half spin, and it's converging the bottom with the top. And the rest of your mind, the big part of the brain around it, is sort of contouring. And your one contour here matches the contour anywhere out there, can be big or small, and it resonates. And you can be like your perspective is all the way out there, like you're saying. You are essentially are there. And, you're feeling, you're sensing, you can feel, sense what's there in the surroundings. And I know maybe you might call this astral projection, or you call it remote sensing or telepathy. It's all really the same thing. And it's a standard in alien thinking. Why? Because, well, they have technology that can amplify, can boost the signal, that can detect the brain signal. They call it psychotronic technology. And by being able to do that, they can communicate more at one time. They can cycle it into computers to store memories and refresh people's memories and use it for education. So the rest of the universe all around us is apparently mostly doing this already, and here we are sitting here just barely even getting our toes wet, although once you've started on it, you're already sort of living that kind of life, which is, I would say, is really pretty much the norm. It's the standard everywhere around us and on other planets, everywhere in the universe.
Doesn't it seem like prior civilizations used to do that, like with the Egyptians and the pharaohs? They had a more a sense of doing that than we do, like we've got that far away from it, where...
Exactly. You can see why, because they didn't have scientists saying there's nothing that goes beyond the speed of light. You can't communicate with distant locations. Your spirit is just, whatever, it's wired into your nerves. Nobody told them that. They didn't have an obstacle where, some people now are just, they're afraid to venture, or they don't think they can.
I agree with that totally.
Yeah, and it's like the rational thinking of the early Renaissance. In those times, they came along and they thought they knew it all, and pretty soon they went from man being the puppet of a kind of a notion of God to being man trying to play God himself, and they were wearing blinders in a sense, because you could tell that first everything was about man. It's all about male gender, but secondly, they thought too much about themselves in their interpretation, and they just weren't doing much. Well, now along come aliens, and they have technology, they have systems, they can control craft. The Roswell aliens controlled craft using their minds with this kind of technology. And I would assert that the most important result of alien contact is not technology, it's not their gizmos or weapons, certainly not weapons. It's the new science of mind. What some people would call astral traveling is simply a kind of remote viewing or remote sensing. You can be sensing what's happening on an entirely different planet. You can expand the space of your sensing, the contour that I was suggesting. You're converging mind energies. You simply contour it. You have all kinds of brain cells and everything to do different contours, even in different directions at the same time. And you can feel essentially what the consciousness is of an entire planet, as strange as it may sound. It's the collective sort of basis there.
It's there. That's a good way that's a good way you just laid it out. And I try to explain that on the show a lot, because it's hard to have people understand what we experience, because you can't. There's really no words to describe it in our dictionary, our English dictionary. It's experience. It's like a spiritual awakening.
Yeah, it's like you're almost going to have to invent new words for this. And what it would feel like is, imagine, say, you've just lowered all your energy, your mind energies, and gotten rid of those, loud beep, beep, beep kind of messages in your mind into big, bright colors, and you're listening to the fainter. And it's as though you're almost hearing a chorus. It's not hearing, but it's like you're feeling those ideas and feelings. Women do this, I think, better than men do right off the bat. But the whole universe is like this. Eldon Bird, a scientist at the Naval Weapons Laboratory, physicist with a PhD, his quote is that it doesn't take any time for this kind of energy. He calls it scalars. Some people call it 0 point. Some people call it electrogravity. It's all the same thing. And your mind can produce this. It just sort of cancels energy out, and then it just slightly varies it. Just by contouring your mind energy, you're varying it in that sense, and it sort of jumps down deeper into space and resonates out. By just varying that, Eldon Bird was saying, it takes no time to go from point A to point B anywhere in the universe, which sounds weird. It's like it's a part of a deeper basis in the physics and the science of everything around us. So imagine. So here's your thought. You're converting this energy. You're doing this. You're simply contouring it. And in a sense, you can not just feel a whole planet. You could essentially get a feeling of a whole galaxy. And it's not like you would hear like every single word in, say a large chorus, but you would, by shifting it back and forth, you could, check and investigate different locations. And it's so interesting now, because we have, it's not just a spiritual notion where it was kind of ineffable and you almost had to immerse in one interpretation or another to do it. We now have a science to explain it, and it's as though without going somewhere, without spending money on craft and all of that and whatever they do to take along, you can essentially do a kind of investigation from over a great distance, which is what aliens do. And again, the book that I just that I have published is about how aliens think, and this is the standard among them. All contactees, all abductees, all whistleblowers say more or less the same, is that they do that because they can communicate more effectively, more graphic. It's as though, for example, when you're normally thinking or talking, the words in your head are like a line on a leaf. Well, telepathy or remote sensing is like communicating an idea of the whole tree rather than just one part of a leaf. And you get the overview.
I like how you explain that, because when I try to tell people, it's like when you're in that out-of-state astral world, it's like you know the answers instantaneously. Like you don't have to. It's hard. You have to bring it back to this reality, and it's hard to do, because in this reality we ask more questions. In that reality, you already know the answer, so you don't think about that same question.
It's interesting how you put that, because that's true. It's kind of weird. So sometimes you know the answer. You have to figure out how you would sort of frame the question or the description of that answer, because it's like you're saying, it's as though the larger understanding is already all around, and it's almost like it's inside of you in a way that you just sort of tap into. It's the weirdness of this new kind of science. Well, it's gotten interesting in the sense that some people see in the old, now, we're looking at whole civilizations, whole societies that do this, and when we look out, in a sense, it's not just about this little point A, Earth, and point B, some other planet. It's more about their whole planetary consciousness, because that's what aliens have evolved to. It's a social identity. It's exactly what you're saying, the larger shared sort of mind communications, not just what I want, give me this, and whether I'll survive or get ahead. because they take care of their societies. Our reports indicate that alien societies are all equalitarian, meaning they all share equally. They pretty much, you get a free education, you get free housing, you have a job, but apparently you probably work much fewer hours than we do, and they have better technology. There's some issues, though. For example,
can we get in? It seems like, can we get into it seems like you're going to get into like the different politics and of these different aliens amongst themselves and amongst us?
Oh, sure, yeah. And that's exactly where sort of walking, in a sense, is that, here we are, we're about 7 billion people on a small planet just barely getting started. Well, in the Milky Way, if there are 2 billion planets, and if they're that probably are Earth-like, you can imagine that since our planet only formed 4.5 billion years ago, and scientists see 350 light years away, very close, is a planet that's 12.7 billion years old. You can get the idea where there are almost certainly alien populations that are billions of years older than we are because their planets formed earlier. So just imagine some of those expanding in different galaxies. You may not know it, but the Milky Way is the product of the merger of smaller galaxies, and it happens over time. All big galaxies are mergers, have merged with smaller galaxies. That's why they're big galaxies. Well, imagine what happens when the populations merge. Do they fight? Do they war? Do they just try to stake claim, like, some weird miner out there with a gun to a new planet? No, they probably have agreements, conventions, and, at least controls to prevent too violent of conflicts. And that suggests that larger populations with greater technology and the easy ability to travel across this galaxy or to other galaxies will already have set the stage, meaning that, if people see abduction or if they see what appears to be an alien craft arriving here, what you're seeing in some cases is one bigger population, older population, coming and trying to do what it wants to do, whereas, maybe we may not agree with that particular population. For example, the Greys. People may consider, for example, the Grey alignment of aliens. They seem to be doing that more than anybody. And meanwhile, they're not reportedly even from this galaxy. Philip Kropf, a essay journalist for the Los Angeles Times, had a direct contact with them. He was asked to write a white paper for their diplomatic contact. And he was told they were from another distant galaxy. So the politics of that would be, well, what are they doing here, trying to essentially, get people aligned with them in this galaxy when, what's going on with the native aliens in our galaxy? And they're probably large populations. I have some information about some large populations, and you can probably read things on the web. I would give you an example. It's a case called Contact with IARGA, IARGA, about a famous Dutch contact with a population reportedly from 10 light years away, right here in our local neighborhood, and they're not. They don't seem to have anything to do with the Greys or abduction, as far as we know. And I would assume that our alien neighbors around us would be watching this incursion by Greys and their aliens, and thinking, do we really want that going on? Because it looks like they're trying to colonize in the area, and it's a big, huge population from some other place, and maybe that's not what they want. So the
Stephen, can you go in, because it's not only the Greys. It seems like the Greys and the Verdants. So if you can go, because to give people a background. So we're talking about the Greys, but the Greys
in your
are
research, a minor subpopulation.
So they're working for another alien race.
Yeah, the Greys, well, again, Philip Kropf is the source on this. By the way, if you know who Carol Rosin is, Carol Rosin is an anti-space weapons researcher she worked for Fairchild Industries, and she actually spoke with Werner von Braun, who she said told her about things about alien-related stuff. Well, Carol Rosin had an encounter with Verdants. She was with a news person, a nationally known news person, when Verdants came right through the wall, and she told this to Philip Kropf and his publisher, and so I just put that in my new edition of my book that I just republished. The point being is the Verdants, according to what Kropf was told, and about 1,600 other humans in the diplomatic opening back in about 2000, was that the Verdants are 500 trillion individuals in number, living on 246,000 planets, and their technology is about 230 million years more evolved than we are. But it's a big, big population, and the Greys are merely a small kind of new, I don't want to say acquisition, that's exactly the wrong word, but a new addition to their alignment of aliens. And the verdants are bigger, older, the Greys are smaller, and essentially kind of dependent on the so-called verdants. And if you're new to this, here's what verdants look like. You know the Greys with the big wraparound eyes. Well, the verdants are slightly taller than the Greys. They're about 5'6", 5'7", says Kropp, and apparently so do other people. And they have these eyes that are like slits, eyes, closed almost where you can't even see inside. Just the lids closed like that with just a line across their eyes. And they're very, I guess you would say, very subtle. I think that they pride themselves on being kind of the managers and the overseers of this very large project, but they seem to also want to get their way, and they come in and they want resources, and they want, their abductions and the taking of human embryos and human, reproductive material, and it seems to have kind of gone beyond what humans first thought it was. For example, the Corso suggested the same. He said, that humans were compromised into allowing and encouraging on, and essentially the aliens dictating the terms of what they were doing. When he said the aliens, he was talking about Roswell aliens who are kind of a half-human, half-gray hybrid, a mix of human and grays.
Well, that's what, not to cut you off, but when the alien experience I had, it appeared it was a gray, but it had human features. It was tall and skinny and like pasty gray, pasty white color, but the eyes were huge. They were round, and they were the green. One had the greenest eyes, and the other one had the bluest eyes I've ever seen. And
did it have any hair?
No hair. No hair.
That sounds like a second stage hybrid. Go ahead.
Yeah, it looks like it's getting closer to us. And one sentence that you made in your book that never dawned on me, because I was like, they're angry, but they're not. And when you said someone described it as an intellectual anger, I said that's exactly what it is. Because I happened to just pop in on them, didn't expect to pop in on them, wasn't trying to pop in on them. I happened to see, when I was astral traveling, I happened to see a UFO, a big silver disc. I'm being nosy. There's like some type of hieroglyphs that were written on it, so I go to get a better look at the hieroglyphs. Next thing you know, I'm in the thing, and I look up, and there's these two grays, and instantaneously as I got onto the ship, they knew I was there, and they turned around, and the impression that I got, they didn't say anything, they just attacked me. The impression I got was, how dare she, this little peon, like, in their language, how dare I just pop in on, who do I think I am, that they are more, they are above me, how am I to just pop in on them? And that, it was like an intellectual anger.
Well, what people need to consider is that, aliens are very different from us in this one respect, and that is, many of them have been able to genetically engineer themselves. So 3 different things combine in aliens to make their emotional sort of, and their anger and their whole way they come across very different. One is that the mind communications, that subdues things, makes it more quiet, allows for larger interactions, more peaceful, but there's a little bit of conformity pressure in that. You can imagine big regime educating its materials and so forth, and its ideas about what to do and what not to do. So that in some cases it could be almost like Big Brother, but I assume they try to move beyond that. The second pressure is they get much older than we do because their science is better, and they can genetically extend the lifetime. So imagine, say, you've been through the hell of, let's say, a world war, or you've been through just very trying things. Maybe they've been watching a situation here and seeing how ugly, let's say, what it was like 400 years ago when kings were, savaging other kings, and then what happens when you had these killer regimes that were, fighting during the world wars, and it would psychologically sort of emotionally numb you. Well, in their case, imagine, say, you're trying to manipulate events of that sort, and if the tendency is to think, humans are still like what those primitive weirds were, hundreds of years ago, so that sort of numbs them out. less emotional regarding us. You know, we're fresh faces. We didn't do that. You know, we have a cosmic awareness, but maybe it's not so easy for them to just suddenly clear it out and think, yeah, these are a better version of people. And the third thing that can essentially numb them is a larger, for example, the Verdants, or let's say any larger society that's more domineering, may come in and with aliens in its mix, you know, new populations, might decide to sort of tweak the genes for certain emotions, like, say, the fight or flight or the violence, and just kind of tone that way down, maybe halfway. You know, if you turn the volume down halfway on that kind of gene, what you get is less troublesome aliens, but they would also sometimes be too obedient, possibly. So you like you're saying, Clifford Stone's quote was that these graves that he met, they had an anger about how humans were so destructive and you know, conflicted, but he said it was an intellectual anger. It wasn't our kind of anger. And you can see the three things that converge to make it that way. They're older, they're emotionally drier, and in their case, living hundreds of years, not thousands of years like the Verdants, hundreds of years, they've seen a lot. And imagine, as you get older, you can become numb. You know, we have the science, well, they have the science now, they have the science, we're getting more of it to extend life, but how do you repair damaged and numbed spirit and sort of feeling and emotions? You know, maybe that's a real complication of this new, very advanced science that they have.
And that's where you went into the different, the sexuals versus the non-sexuals.
Yeah. So, and that occurred in a context, and that's the context of, well, here's the context. Aliens, they're much older populations. In my book, I report on a population that says it is billions of years old, and it would even stretch our idea of how old the universe is. And they prove, you know, it sounds like I'm just saying this on my own. If you read my book, I outline methods, the science, and this remote sensing so that you can actually check on such things. But I would suggest if and when you get up to speed on that, because I just went back and redid my book, and if you read it carefully, you have a good chance of being able to do this. Remember, aliens have different ideas about you, about us. They would expect you to be non-violating, non-violent. Even your metaphors, the words in your speech, you know, in shared mind interactions, you'd want to be careful about which aliens and how you contacted them. Well, in my contact, along come these aliens, that I call them hyper-advanced aliens or hyperversals in that first book, and they assert that they're billions of years old, and they do a fairly good job of demonstrating a capability that far exceeds those of all the other aliens I've encountered. Although in some cases they come from very large regimes that may be a little bit fixed and rigid in their judgment and their ideas. Their main concern, they say, is the larger energy ecology of the universe. And you know, they outline it this way. This new kind of science, the scalars I was just telling you about, where you converge energy, you do this in your brain, anybody can do it, and it converges, it cancels out the energy, but it's still there looking for a place to leap out. Well, it sort of leaps out in a sense. It's like water in a bathtub, you know? Kid in the bathtub moves a little bit back and forth. It's a big push to get those waves going. But once you move in tandem, in rhythm with those waves, you can spill the water right out very easily. That's what happens when you converge energy down, say in your mind, or when scientists do this. It's like you're spilling, it converges in lockstep back and forth, a resonance, and it spills out as though the gravity, or gravitics is what they call it, this scalar stuff, this resonance. And it's not, you know, some scientists are thinking, oh, gravity must go at the speed of light. No, gravity is almost instant, and that's what's weird. That's the big new challenge for some people to get over the hump, to understand that you can do remote sensing of that sort. Well, you wouldn't want to wait around for those people to all figure out whether the new kind of science actually exists, because we see it exists. Aliens arrive, they have technology, they do this, they're sensing. You can pick it up. These much older aliens, these hyperversals, well, what they're concerned about is in this new science is that this new kind of energy, if you use it on a big scale as a planet, time is more elastic. It slightly speeds the flow of time in the immediately surrounding space. Doesn't sound like much, so what? Who cares, right? The energy is not totally free. It's not free for whatever as much as you want. Because if you're slightly speeding the flow of time, that means you're shortening the energy life. this kind of energy is called gravitic. Don't worry about your brain. Your brain's not going to affect anything. But if you have big energy systems and everything on your planet is run using this kind of energy, you could shorten the duration of your sun or even gravitically pull larger solar flares out. Well, if your population just grows and grows and you become billions and then trillions, all of a sudden you have to worry about how long is the energy of a galaxy or star system going to last. And these hyper advanced aliens come along and they're trying to suggest you really have to be careful. And they don't only suggest it. You see Greys coming in. The Greys, maybe you've noticed, they're non-sexual. They were engineered to be not sexually reproducing, but they clone. They don't even have sexual anatomy. Well, how come? Why did they do that? Did they just decide, who cares? You know, I don't need that anymore. Probably not. Their planet was effectively destroyed according to, you know, all the sources that we have. And those sources are a little bit murky because you can imagine aliens, how many aliens are going to arrive and say, you know what, we were total foul-ups. We ruined, destroyed our whole planet, and why don't you just welcome us in your front door? Because people are going to think, whoa, wait a minute, you destroyed your old planet, or somebody destroyed your old planet? What's that all about? Why would we invite you in? And something happened in their planet, and they may have used this kind of energy wrongly, too suddenly. In my book I talk about apparently ways to sort of counterbalance it or sort of configure it sort of in a larger sense so that you're not just pulling stuff out of your sun, you know, damaging your Earth. But so these older aliens come along and they're trying to suggest that non-sexual reproduction helps you genetically advance more quickly. Non-sexuals are less violent. They're less territorial. They won't erupt as much. They think more, plan more carefully. They won't overpopulate, and that is one of the main concerns of any large alien population. Is how many of us are there? Well, if we just overpopulated without any restraint, you can imagine what would happen to the universe. It would be colonizers and too much energy drain, and the universe is not going to really be a very healthy place to live in if too much of that occurs. So they show up, these older aliens, and they're suggesting, well, you know, their preference would be that, like the Greys, and like some of the other aliens in this verdance alignment of aliens, we might do better as non-sexuals. Meanwhile, you know, the verdants, 500 trillion of them, they did not get that way non-sexually. They are reportedly sexual. But they told Kropp and other people in their opening that they went through a non-sexual phase. But then they said, well, we didn't find that fulfilling. The question is that their whole story, or did they just decide that they want to expand? And they seem to move in tandem with an older, I won't say seem, they certainly move in tandem with a larger hyper-advanced population that itself suggested that they were this older population, 1 quadrillion. Now think about that. That's 1,000 trillion aliens at some point in the past, although reducing in size at present. But they didn't get that way non-sexually either. So, you know,
I'm just trying to... Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to tie it into what's going on, because we're hearing a lot of that from the elite about overpopulation. Their main concern is about overpopulation, and that's all we hear about. And you also were saying how these other regimes, these Greys or Verdants, they kind of integrate into our systems, where they kind of come in looking like us, acting like us, and taking over like major, maybe politics, and they're integrating in our politics and our military and stuff like that. So do you think that this whole overpopulation is coming, the whole thought that's coming in for the last 20 years is coming from maybe these aliens installing their overpopulation ideas on us? Because it seems like they have no problem overpopulating. They want to monitor everybody else not to overpopulate while they can keep reproducing.
Well, that's a very interesting contradiction, isn't it? Because, you know, they're big in number, and they come in and they say, oh, they would like to sort of help us, quote. And what they told Kropp was this. The Verdants wanted to erect a 600 square mile or 60 square mile area where a global government center would exist in New Mexico. And I think what happened in 1998 through about 2000 when they proposed this big diplomatic opening is that they looked around and realized that humans were not so eager to allow an alien power from a distant galaxy to come in and set up our government, central government for the planet. It's as though saying, yeah, you're just going to run this show. And I think they're kind of naive to think that that was going to work back in 1998 or 2000. And anyway, so the idea of overpopulation, well, that's both a human ecological concern, and it's also, I think every alien population looks around and thinks, you wouldn't want anybody to overpopulate. So here come these verdants, in the gray alignment. They come in and you see a lot of these craft. Here's a disc here, a disc over there, an orange globe over here, maybe some crop circles that they might do, maybe this or that, or up in Washington, James Gilliland appears to be connected with some of them. And it's a lot of them, isn't it? They seem to be just buzzing us all over the place. And the question is, would you really want all aliens to be like that, just, coming into your system, whatever they choose, in huge numbers? I think that it's kind of I would suggest this, the larger universal standard, the only standard that makes any sense is your thoughts, your sort of, your idea of how you fit in with other populations should be, as much as you can, non-sexual, in the sense that sexuality just gets in the way. It's like ego, ego. The amount of ego that you express when you're older, this as you get older and mature, it's the more you try to express ego, the less you're developing your thought and your awareness. It's like it just does the opposite of what you really want or need to be doing, we as a population. Well, sexuality in a sense is very closely tied to ego. So in interactions, if you were interacting with an alien, you wouldn't want to mess around with much about sexuality. It's just like stupid mess that gets in the way. It has nothing to do with what you're talking to them about. You might want to ask, how big is your population? How long have they existed? How do you interact with other populations? Because, like, say, the verdants come in 500 trillion, and they're sexual, and they just want to expand, and it would seem like they also might want to control. And
but it seems very strange that all of our politics seems to be the alien agenda, where it's like the verdants have a one world government type of thing, and how we are getting pushed into the one world government.
I think the challenge is this. Other aliens suggest that the only way to keep it sane and from becoming stupid, which would in short order, is that if you have, like, say, a global kind of government, you must absolutely have legal guarantees, individual rights. You must have powers in different parts of the world that can counteract or challenge the rulings, the interpretations, and even within a government. That's what the U.S. seems to specialize in, even though it's gone off the track with, like global greed and, corporate greed and warfare. But if you preserve the checks and balances and the ability to step back and, stop something from happening, which we don't quite have yet because we don't have a global kind of basis like that, then as an alien population, you could live well and not just go off the deep end. The problem with the verdants is this. They say that they all, here they have 246,000 planets in different places. It sounds like a lot. If that was all in their one galaxy, 246,000 would be about one out of every 600,000 to 1 million star systems. So it's not as much as it sounds. The universe is huge, and the verdants are not very much or very consequential in a much larger sense. But if they came along and they're over here with with their attitudes about that kind of growth, then you'd really have to watch out, because that would disturb the ecology here. It would sort of upset what we're doing. So we have to, I think that, Bud Hopkins, myself, if you've read Marshall V. and Summers' books, and you've read what David Jacobs' abductees talk about, it looks like an infiltration, to people who've read about this, a breeding, a hybrid infiltration project, and the question is, what are they doing with those hybrids? Well, it looks like they're sort of here trying to essentially gain, influence over us in a sense. And I know that sounds weird to some people, but it really looks like their project is to pretty much have control here over time, essentially replace us with their hybrids. And so the question would be, do you really, is that what you want? I mean, this big sex. The verdants are centrally, all the decisions, even the crew rotations. If there's a disk of theirs over here, the crew rotations are communicated instantly back to their 114 million light years away home planet, and they're controlled even that much, to that extent, by a central government. I think they sort of failed in the sense of checks and balances. They should allow more kind of independent initiative outside, or like say their own thinking, decision making. They even Verdance reportedly, according to Crop, there's a 36-hour day. It's a bigger planet than ours, but they want every one of their planets, even on every disk out there, even over here, to have a 36-hour clock on its wall or in its system, not whatever their real planet says.
So that's quite interesting, because like when you were saying infiltration, as we all know, and most of us who are into the awakening process and being aware kind of feel like the elite had infiltration, where that's why there's this certain bloodline that they continuously, mate amongst themselves for the bloodline. I wonder if that has to be part of the hybridization program.
Well, look at what William Cooper, who was an intelligence briefer to the fleet commander of the Pacific, FINPAC, I guess they call it. He was told that he apparently found that the Bilderberg thing, you had this meeting, you just happened in Virginia, in Chantilly, I think it was. They have this meeting every year, and these elites, and guess who it is? It's Rockefeller, the Dutch royals, it's Rothschild, it's people like that. And this is all what some people call Illuminati, others call New World Order. And these people, according to Cooper, they were meeting to remove control of alien-related programs. Bilderberg was formed by Prince Bernhard and by the suggestion of Victor Rothschild, and the idea was to remove control of these alien-related programs that had happened after Roswell and give it to this shared international group, which involves royalty, princes, and, it doesn't at all match what you'd think what the United States government should be doing. I mean, it's like going backwards in time, back before the revolution, and sort of giving control to this weird little elite. Well, the point is that Bilderberg seems to have this, and they discuss alien matters. Michael Sala on his website has little postings from about 2.5 years ago where it shows Bilderberg meeting to discuss alien-related subjects, and you see it on their agenda, and they're talking about it while they come out. They step outside the door, and they would laugh or scorn you, or maybe even try to just ridicule you if you even mention anything about aliens. And Bilderberg looks like about as close of a kind of basis for that kind of what would look like something. I, in my book, discuss who would be and who are reportedly, other aliens not part of the Grey Line. They suggested who might be, not who might be, they alleged directly who the direct operatives are of this breeding program. And guess what? Look at Bilderberg. That's many of them.
And they just had a meeting not too long ago. That coincidence.
Yeah. And the point is, you and I are living this kind of life, and you already read and you already see things where people are sort of trying to sabotage our internal order. Guess what? That's what Philip Crop quotes Verdance, where they say, in the past, for example, in one case of these two planets that they were both interested in, they said that their plan was what they did was they inserted 10,000 breeding program operatives to become heads of corporations, military, heads of states, and so forth. And their job was to thwart, to frustrate, to misguide that planet so that the Verdants could eventually achieve their ends there. It was like it was sabotage inside. And
that's what it looks like our Earth is kind of going to right now, with the oil spills and all and big corporations, the economy, the resources. I mean, there should be enough food to feed everybody. You know how much food we throw away, yet there's people starving, purposely.
How long are we on for? How long does your show last?
We have another hour. How about we go on break? I'll give the phone number, give you a quick minute to get your thoughts and get you a drink. And everybody, the phone number is 347-996-5515. Again, 347-996-5515. If either Reset or Jegs, I know I can't type you because I'm on the thing. If you can put some music so we can get a quick break.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Does it sound okay?
Oh, hello. Welcome back to the Astral Traveler with me, Retta, on Type 1 Radio. The phone number to call in is 347-996-5515. Again, 347-996-5515. There was a caller on the line. Are they still on the line?
No, not yet. They'll have to call back in. It was from 203 area code.
203.
Sonic's on the line.
Hi, Sonic. You got a phone call for George? A question?
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello? Hi, George, are you still there?
Yeah, just here, right here.
Go ahead, Sonic.
Well, hello, George. How are you, my friend?
It's fine, thanks.
Excellent. How did you? What got you into the subject that you're talking about at the moment?
Well, I used to be skeptical of the idea that aliens could arrive here because, I was interested in physics and science and thought, how would they get past the speed of light? 1995, I was walking through a park in San Francisco, and contact began in my case. Way smarter than I am, much more information, very kind of like faded, imagine, with graphics, like even a faded sense of the graphic, and conveying things and starting a discussion, and then, adding ideas over time, has continued, over time until the present. This is ongoing now. And, definitely different tenor, different mind ideas, different science, different concepts provoking me to think about new ideas, kind of pushing it a little bit this way and then, waiting for me to catch up. And that's how I got started on it. And I have to admit, in the early stages of contact, there were some of the gray alignment aliens apparently tried to sort of, once it got started, they seemed to want to try to move in on it and sort of co-opt the interaction. And, when contact begins, imagine you're just walking along and you have a first kind of contact in that case. At some point you realize this is absolutely not human, and then they reply, yeah, and you start to get the idea of who they are, their physiology, their everything, who it is. You're completely, absolutely awed. I mean, if someone brought you onto an alien ship, you would be so astounded it would be beyond what science fiction is for you. And that's kind of a weird threshold for many people because, they're just so completely overwhelmed. They want to know more. Suddenly here's this telepathic or mind communication, an alien, conveying feelings. They could even turn up the dial on different feelings in the sense that they do. And they're not violent. They're not killers between themselves. And they talk about peaceful interaction and it's shared mind. Just that alone, shared mind. And most people are like, wow, this is what we need. I love this. I want this to continue. And they stop having a kind of critique, where what happened in my case was, this group of aliens that I'd been contacted with were kind of questioning me, what about abduction and all of that kind of control? Is that legal? Is that a violation? And I started thinking, wow, I really need to step back and be more honest about how I really think and not just be awed by this. And that's kind of the first threshold that some people just don't get over time. Now, I should balance this. I should say.
So is it like a download?
Well, a download is sort of like, it's because you're thinking in terms of like 0-1, a binary sort of, all of this is just there kind of implanted in you. It's more like this. It's imagine, say, here you are with your mind, and, you think you have your ideas, and all of a sudden, this larger envelope of their sort of awareness and energy, and it has information sort of flowing in it between the alien, their system, the, mind interaction with this new technology, and more ideas are sort of up in the air, and they're sharing thoughts. And all of a sudden, your head pops into that envelope, and it's not really like a download. It's like you're resonating all into all of this, and when they want it to be more specific, they'll be more specific. They can use words and so forth. So all of a sudden, your head is in this larger envelope, and you learn eventually how to just simply contour so that you can interact, with a different location or a different group. And it's not like a download, because a download would be like 0-1, just, sort of streams in, and you're not aware of what's coming in as it comes in. This is what you're aware of it right at the outset, and the details in a larger sense.
George, I also want to tell people also is that you have to use I try to tell people to use their gut instinct and their sixth sense, like their gut instinct, because when you first start going contact, you don't know if you're contacting service, we'll say service to self and service to others, service to self, group, or service to others. So you really have to know the questions that you're asking in your brain and really resonate and try to feel if these people are telling you the truth or if they're manipulating you. Do you agree with that, George?
Yeah.
You kind of get that feeling.
see, this second book that I'm writing is called After Contact and Conflict, and it's all about how to make our own choice and how to actually do contact. The first book, Alien Mind, the one you can read free on the web, it will do the same thing if you read the how-to section. And I always have to provide, cautions. I would be like a doctor who's guilty of malpractice.
Also, hold on. I want to say, everybody, he does have a how-to section, and his book, Alien Mind. This is George Lebono, Alien Mind. He does have it's like a 3-day tutorial of how to do it.
Yeah, and it makes it really simple. I think anybody can do it, and I just improved it in a way to make it so that it works. It really works, because I don't know if it worked in the early version. So you start on this, and you have to be careful. I mean, because all of a sudden it's not like I'm the little baby in the basket. Do with me what you will, because that's the attitude of some people. They almost think it's like it's spiritual. I finally found what they think, in a sense. So I finally found the progenitors, where God really exists, and they're absolute putty in the hands of those aliens. Now remember, aliens started in populations like us. They were, for example, the Verdants explained to Phil Kropp, they were warlike and violent in their early phases. And meanwhile, they come over here, and I would assert that they're actually using their operatives to manipulate violence here. Now, from their perspective, here's what they will say, and what they do say in interactions I've had. They'll say this, and my interactions are not just anymore like, I'm just sort of, here I am, warm and fuzzy in whatever they're doing. It's my interactions are where I come with critique. I'm sort of standing up for humankind. I'm arguing issues that some people aren't even aware of, and I'm standing up about in terms of law and violation, ecology, and our rights and our sovereignty, often with them. And here's what they say back. They say, listen, we offered genetic technology. We've actually been, among other aliens apparently, not the only ones, to help do genetic introduce new genetic materials into humankind, and they also say that we've taught you alien norms. We can help your society preserve its ecology, to be nonviolent, to get beyond the stupid crisis that you're involved in. Meanwhile, at the same time, it seems they're manipulating that same crisis to prolong it. So that's why I don't trust the Verdants. The Greys, I think of the Greys as being almost. I don't think they're as scheming as the Greys as Verdants are. And the Verdants.
Well, the Greys. Well, you can notice, like we were saying, that the Greys that I encounter are kind of a hybrid, where, like how you say, maybe these are the process of starting to replace us.
Yeah, and that's what you're looking at. You're looking at later stage hybrids. David Jacobs, induction researcher.
No, I mean when I seen them, they were almost exactly like us, except for they were still had some of the gray features. But I mean, if they continue on the gene path that they are on, they will be looking human, but they will still have the alien mind, so to speak.
I think from their perspective, what they're trying to do is come up with a hybrid that's so close to us, but has more, essentially their composition and their genetics, that they could slip in
and their
mindset,
mindset,
even notice it.
Yeah, and they have their mind. Yes, they want an alien breed to look like us, to pass as us, but have their mindset.
So you say you're sort of projecting, and you're in among them. And what did they do? What was their first response? What did they say or try to do?
It was an instantaneously. Like I knew what was going on. I tripled. When they attacked me, I got out my spiritual body again and watched them attack me.
What's the attack like? In what sense?
Well, the first they did physical. Well, they can only do physical because I was in the astral body, which is like a human body. But as soon as I popped in onto their ship, they turned around instantaneously. It kind of caught me off guard because I'm one of the people. Right? Yeah, they knew I popped in instantaneously as soon as I did. But I didn't. I would have never thought I would have had contact. I was very straight-laced. So when they turned around, I had the instinct. I mean, I looked at them, and it kind of took me off. Like I was like, they look like humans, but they're grays. I instantaneously knew it. But their anger towards me was like, how dare you? Who the hell do you think you are? Type of. That's not exactly what they said, but that's how I felt. Like, who am I to, jump in on them? They're supposed to be in control.
Like they don't want you to know what you're seemingly about to find out. Well, in this kind of experience, it's like you're bilocating, is what some people would call it also. It's, just simply that resonance. Like imagine, say, this kind of resonance in your mind is like imagine, say, you just sort of contour in your mind. You've done that sort of energy. You contour your mind, and there's a huge bubble. Imagine like a big orb of space, and maybe wherever they are, it could be 50,000 miles, maybe a light year out there, and you're on this side of the bubble, and it resonates. It curves exactly opposite or anywhere along the inside of within that space, and it's like you're actually there, and that's what's kind of
yeah. I had an actually, you do. I had an actual physical type of body where they grabbed me and threw me around. When they were doing that, I jumped out of that type of astral body and was spirit watching them. But then they shot me in the back of my astral body with some type of thing, and it made me go. It made all my cells come back on this reality instantaneously. Like it woke me up to.
Well, they have what are called psychotronic systems. Remember, they use it for education, for security, for monitoring, and so forth. And if you pop into it, all of a sudden it can identify you instantly. And, of course, that's why they would turn around. And it's essentially like they're turning around to, like, wherever it is you are or sort of resonating from. And they have a way of sort of dampening it. I've had this experience. What I would suggest is this, okay? You don't want to just pop right into, like, a ship like that.
I didn't mean to. I don't suggest anybody to do it. I didn't mean to do it. It just happened.
You appear on their sort of, it's not radar, it's psychotronics, and it's real science. They have the physics. It's called scalars. The scalars detect you. It characterizes you, and then they start to look back at you. What you would want to do, I think, I have this technique, I even talk about it in my book. You sort of pull your perspective back from, like, imagine you're in a perspective out in space, kind of a distance away from them, and then even get a reading of who they are, and you can still resonate across their whole ship. All the information is available for you, but you do it sort of like, it's like in pulses, or not pulses, it's just like, fast bursts. And rather than keeping it made so visual in that sense, which is when they're going to detect you, you could stay in that further space, or even adopt like a second shell of space around it, and they'll be that much less able to sort of detect or sort of act in regarding you, because there's sort of safeguards you can do that. I'm very careful about this, because in remote sensing, I don't want to be the person who taught somebody to just sort of put themselves in the wrong circumstance, and then they find they're being abducted, or they're not really able to sort of fend for themselves. What I was going to say is that in the new phase, in the old phase, in the early days, we're trying to figure out, well, who and what are these aliens? In the next phase, we were sort of getting an idea of how they are, what they're up to, and what the difference was between certain kinds of aliens. We know about grays and so-called verdants. They're not even from this galaxy, and yet they come here. And they tell people,
have you had any experience with the so-called reptilians? I've never had a personal experience with them. Have you?
I have not. The only reptilian would be the reptile brain in my own head, what I mean? Or in the zoo. The reptile brain is the lower part of the brain. Actually, that's the part of your brain. It's called the limbic. It's underneath this big part of your brain that goes up around, all around, on the inside, the center. That's the part of your brain that you sort of, it feels like the field effect, half twists, in a half spin, and a half flip, and it converges energy. It's actually, it sort of helps. The hippocampus is in there. It's about your spatial reasoning. It's this little thing that goes along.
George,
yes.
Would you, from your experience, would you say that, do you think that these beings that are contacting you are in this 3D universe, in this galaxy, or are they a slightly different dimension? Is it a frequency?
This is the most common question people say. People say this, they live in another dimension, as if they don't have a 3D physical existence. Well, they do have a 3D physical existence, but they never want to be limited to 3D. What I was exactly talking about, just when you started talking, is that your mind converges energy, and then it's like you're sort of resonating into hyperspace. That's 5D. 4D is time. Remember the fourth dimension? You take that for granted. It's just you're moving through time. But the 5D is where you're sort of resonating into hyperspace. Their craft sort of manipulate around in that. Their physics does that. Their science, and their communications, and when they show up out of nowhere, they're sort of bending. Philip Corso said, he talked about the alien craft. The Army scientists were saying it was as if they folded gravity around the craft, and they were riding in that sort of wave. They were in it. And so folding gravity means, like, some people, they look up, they see the ship, and then it disappears. it sort of folds the light from in front, goes right around behind, and it can still be there, but folding essentially like the space or the gravity around it. Or
like
they can do jumps across space. So
they'll still be there, but we can't see it with these irises that we have.
And I think humans already have some of that technology. You know, if you probably heard stories about the TR-3B, big triangular-shaped craft that can just look like it disappears because it moves real fast, or some of these other crafts that have been copied or using some of the same technology. You know, are you located in Britain? Let's see, your name is, what's your name?
I'm Sonic. Yeah, I'm one of the hosts of the Type 1 Radio Lounge here on Type 1 Radio. I'm from Brighton in the UK, just south of London.
I've been doing research on the Falkirk Triangle in that area up in there, you know, up around, it's up in Scotland, right? Between Edinburgh and what's the name of it, Glasgow, is it?
Yeah.
It's up in that area. And you know what I find? It's interesting. This is going to sound weird to you. Right in the center of the Falkirk Triangle, in that area where the majority of the recent, you know, phases of sightings, especially from like 93 to like 96, right in the middle of that Falkirk Triangle are these big estates. They're owned, it's by the Earl of Penrose. Today's name, I forget his name now. It's Penrose. He married, her name was Hannah Rothschild. Back in the 1800s, the Earl of Penrose has huge estates up in there, thousands and thousands of hectares.
Yep,
he married a Rothschild, and all of that Falkirk Triangle pretty much centers exactly on where these Rothschild properties are. And the big spate of sightings happened, believe it or not, right in those years, right before when Phil Croft was reporting, the Greys were leading up to their attempt to do a big diplomatic opening. They were contacting 1,600 humans. 800 of those were called so-called deputy envoys. 800-something were called ambassadors. So these people had to meet. They had to have different so forth and liaison and interact with aliens. And that's right about the time you see this huge peak of sightings right up in there. And here are these Rothschild family estates in the area. And that has...
And it's funny how they're the elite, you know, that are putting forward this alien type of agenda, which is the Rothschild.
And I have sources. I have alien sources. Remember, I'm a person who interacts on this, and I've had by hyper-advanced aliens suggesting that the French Rothschild is a direct operative of the Verdant alignment, along with, I'll mention some other names. I mean, I normally don't mention this on here.
All my family's from Scotland, and all the when the Templars got excommunicated from Rome and shipped out of France, they all went to Scotland. My family name, Aitchison, that is the name of the oldest Masonic lodge, which was on our ancestral house, on the land of our ancestral stately home, just outside of Edinburgh. So I can concur with what you're saying there. Yeah, there's a lot of very, very big estates. Balmoral is up there.
Balmoral's that's further north. That's the Queen's Summer Estate, which is up north in Balmoral, which is up going further up in another bay. But down in the Falkirk Triangle is right in there where the first.
And Rosslyn Chapel is there as well in the in that triangle, because that's just outside of Edinburgh, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean it's interesting that one particular area. And the question would be so my concern is, were they actually, because Rothschild appears to be so deeply, some of the Rothschilds, and after Amschel, Rothschild committed suicide, who was, I think, the British Rothschild, one of Jacob's sons, was expected to be the big heir in the Rothschild family. He was trying to consolidate Rothschild fortunes such that they would be, what I suspect was too immediately apparent. Supposedly some of the power shifted to the French, but now, you've got some of these other Rothschilds in Britain. And, guess what? Up there also is, it's called B-Sky Television is what it's called? B-Sky?
B-Sky, but Rupert Murdoch.
Which is Jacob Rothschild was on the board of directors of that B-Sky B, which is shared with a little bit of Murdoch, obviously. And, they just kicked one of the Murdochs out of it, because of these recent scandals. So you've got a lot of concentration of those people who have these very, I mean, here's the Bilderberg thing, which is set up by Victor Rothschild and Rockefeller to essentially reportedly...
And just to say, the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds just combined their financial fortunes in a company.
Right, yeah, in one of the Rothschild finance, one of their corporations. And the question is, why are they doing that? Before, it seemed like they were almost religiously trying to hold a separation, and now it looks like they're... I think this is a weird phase they're entering in this sense, But the question is, so we've got this, you've got an abduction and a breeding program, and you have that peaking just when they're moving towards a kind of a supposed diplomatic opening, which fell completely flat, and it doesn't look, I mean, how many people do you know that would think, oh, sure, why don't we just be colonized by aliens? I mean, from their perspective is, you have to remember, big population from somewhere else, but they assume they know more, they know better. So from their perspective, their internal propaganda is that, of course they're right in wanting to do what they do. Look at us. We're primitive. There's violence, and we're disease-ridden. We don't live long. If we were part of their thing, we would live better in a sense. But then the question is, how many people would agree to be colonized, and what would be the consequences of that? Would you have... what would the law? It would be like we're just entirely controlled by some other whatever. I don't know many people who are eager for that kind of change.
I know I'm not. Everybody, again, the call-in number is 347-996-5515. We're on with George Lebono. He's our guest, talking about the alien mind.
And we have a caller, 205. You're on the Astral Traveler show with Retta.
Hello.
Hi. Hello, Retta. How are you again?
I'm good. How are you? You have a question for George?
Actually, I have a rebuttal for George. It depends on what type of alien you're dealing with, as far as the Rothschilds and Rockefellers and all those. There's a certain type of, you have your good and your bad of everything. So I'm figuring they have to be the bad part of what our society is dealing with today, because it seems they have no feelings for anything or anyone except for the banknote that they are trying to gather up. That's my take on that.
So what you're saying is you think the aliens are adapting to this dark, corrupt side of us in that sense, in order to address that? Is that what you mean?
We don't have, I think the average human doesn't have a dark side. I think if we are aliens, then them, they are a race of different type of aliens that are trying to control and do everything else to us. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Well, that's basically what George was saying. I don't want to put words in George's mouth. He was saying that there's a part of these burdens that are integrating with the breedization program to kind of manipulate our system here for their benefit, at the same time trying to act like they come up with a solution. Problem, reaction, solution.
I should say this. So here we're talking about an alien alignment, includes the Greys.
Can everybody put their, who's not talking, put their mics on pause? I'm sorry, George, if you're just getting real low.
So we have the Greys and the so-called Nordics and the tall Greys and all the aliens of that group, and they work together, and they're coming from very, very distant place. There are 150 other galaxies that are closer to us than would be the Verdant home galaxy, 14 million light years away. So, they are not in our bailiwick. We're not under their jurisdiction in any way whatsoever. And for us to say we prefer independence is not radical. As a matter of fact, we have alien neighbors, I assume, in this galaxy that would obviously object to this coming in and this domineering and this, attempt to essentially hijack control here by an alien group of that sort. I have information, and I'm putting it into my next book, and I went back and put some of it in my first book, about two large populations in the Milky Way, native to the Milky Way, not Verdant, not part of... the Verdants and the Greys, they talk about a galactic sort of, quote, federation, even though that sounds like Star Trek sort of hokum. They use that term, I think, to mislead people and make them think that they belong here, that they're part of our galaxy's sort of governing sort of council, and they aren't. They have nothing to do with it. They aren't even native here. So they don't belong in that sense, and I think they're not wanted in that sense. They are, but what we do have in our galaxy, my sources say this, that there's one population that is, at its largest one that we know of, or what I've been told about, is 38 trillion aliens, and that would be, if you do the math, that would be probably on about 10,000 or more planets. And I also have heard about and heard from another population that is about 130 million years more advanced than we are, and they live on 1,200 planets, essentially in what you might consider our quadrant of the Milky Way. I was shown a kind of a map, an overview. Imagine the Milky Way, there it is below, and you're seeing the spirals, and there are 4 big circles, in each 4 or 5 big circles showing kind of an area of circulation of different big populations. And if that's accurate, and this is going to sound weird, but we're just talking about remote sensing, my preliminary sort of checks suggest that it's a good representation. We mean our galaxy is more balanced, diverse, and it's not just like the Verdant galaxy, dominated and controlled by one huge overgrown population, but there's a check and a balance among different populations, and it would be more democratic in that sense. We don't see, as far as we know, as far as any of my sources or any other sources I've ever heard from anyone, we don't see the aliens from this galaxy coming in, abducting, trying to gain control, and talking about essentially colonizing our surroundings before humans are even competent to know what's going on.
Oh, okay, I understand. I may have came in at one of the moments where I didn't hear all of the discussion that you all were having. But I have, interesting enough, I have read this book by this author called Seta Aset. Her name is spelled Setaasset, and it's called Chemistry. And she's dealing with a lot of what you were saying in your book about the aliens that are already here that are supposedly gathering up their kind and going back to distant planets. So that it's a very interesting book as well, and along with what you were saying about what's happening on our Earth now. And
I think what's going on now. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I think what's going on is we see the gray alignment comes in, and they're trying to completely, totally overwhelm people here, and they want people to think that the only aliens that we know about or should be concerned about are Verdants, Greys, Nordics, and their little handful of aliens, and the ones that they have accompanying them, when none of those aliens, any of them, have anything to do with the native neighbors that live all around us.
That's interesting, George. That's quite interesting. So basically, they want.
Go ahead.
They all have the same agenda, basically.
Well, the gray-related aliens have this. If you met one, for example, a Nordic, you would probably think, "Wow, these are more. They seem more peaceful and more, nonviolent. They seem to have a better basis than we do." But you would find the exact same thing with every single alien you meet, because they're just more evolved. But the gray-verdant alignment wants us to think that there's nothing to be concerned about except their aliens, because they don't apparently want us to interact with our immediate neighbors who are all over the place, all around us. And if you do this kind of remote sensing, which is what I suggest people try to do, you can actively investigate this on your own. You won't be sitting there thinking, oh, the only aliens that exist in this galaxy are rays, human-looking aliens that they've apparently created through their hybrid breeding program, and these so-called verdants, and the tall grays and whatever else they come up with.
George, I'm glad that you made that point too, because I always do. I tell people when I try to tell them how to ask or give suggestions on how to astral travel, like how you have suggestions, I also say be cautious. Use your instincts and your gut, and check it out for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Don't take anybody's word for it. Find out these answers for yourself.
I'm going to say something that's going to sound pretty weird, but this is a real fact, and this can really be done. The same techniques that you use to check on this kind of remote sensing of aliens, you can check this entire planet. And what happens is that there can be no really major sort of area of crime or major conspiracy in and among us that you cannot detect, because the information resonates back and forth so much and in such depth and so quickly that you can instantly, this sounds weird, but you can instantly locate whatever it is that's out there that would be violating us on this planet. So if you
Hold on, George. Someone, I can hear a background if someone has their radio on or has their mic on. You're echoing in the background. If you're done, caller, it might be you. Do you have any other questions for George?
Oh, no, I don't. That's all.
Thank you for calling in and tuning in.
I'm just going to hold.
What I'm saying is that
yeah, we'll just mute your mic. You can still
just mute your mic. Everybody give me patience tonight. I am conducting the show off the iPhone with the help of Sonic, with the Sonic Lounge every Saturday, and Reset and Jay. I want to thank everybody for helping me get this show. And George, you've been a trooper, and I appreciate it.
How much longer do we go?
We have a half hour.
Okay, so what I was going to say is this. This new science, this new kind of communications and remote sensing is going to change the way human society functions, because people will be more trusting, but we will also be able to nearly instantly locate people who are working against the basic common good. And, if there's like a clutch of conspiracy that's trying to foul us all, it cannot possibly hide. I'll give you a quote. There's a man named Russell Targ. He's a PhD, and he's written about, remote sensing, and he explains that he worked at SRI, Stanford Research Institute, with Hal Puthoff, that zero-point energy researcher. SRI became bigger than the whole Stanford University research apparatus, and so they had to separate off. And Targ trained hundreds in the CIA in how to do remote sensing, viewing things inside closed containers, and even looking into the past, weird as that may sound, and during the Cold War. And now he talks about it, and he trains people. He'll give a little demonstration where he'll teach you how you could do this, how to clear your mind, make your thoughts like a dark black screen so that you're not thinking anything. Your sense of your mind, wave frequencies are like in that low energy. Remember I said the rested states? In order to be able to discern, to pick up the information you need to do. And people are now going to be able to, he says, the big secret, Targ says, the big secret is that there are no secrets. And this is a PhD in physics who's trained people, hundreds in the CIA, to actually do this in the past. Not that I'm trying to advocate CIA methods. I think you can do much better. Read my book. It's not, I'm describing essentially what I'm fairly certain is the alien method, which is faster, more efficient, and it's easier compared to, say, the military version of it.
And I think, George, more and more people are waking up to this fact. I think at this time, and whether it's 2012 or whatever, at this time, more and more people are waking up to they're more than just this physical body and the limitations of this physical body. More and more people are interested in these fields. They're exploring more than what they've done, let's say, even 10 years ago.
I'll bet you've been through this same experience that I went through. At first, when this happened, I felt, wow, kind of naked, because, some of the thoughts in my head would have been embarrassing, and they just didn't belong. And suddenly, when you're living a transparent kind of lifestyle, you just park that garbage aside. As a matter of fact, you probably never go back to it because it has no meaning, no validity.
No, and it also gives you more of not power as in I can rule you, but more of a power of who you interact with, your own surroundings. Someone can't just pop in on you and do the things that you have more of a power, more of a control of your surroundings. I don't know like when I first started, I felt very naked, like they could do whatever they wanted to me.
Yeah,
now, they wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah, now you've got the skill to check them back in reverse. If you're able to actually, you're talking about looking into an alien craft, you probably find that humans are relatively easy in comparison, right? I mean, that's the way it is. Like when you're interacting and being challenged by aliens, you turn around and look at the human population and think, I need to do something to help people here get more up to speed, because this is going to make a big difference. And more importantly, when we're already being there's kind of an intervention going on by some aliens in or regarding this planet, we need to be competent to sort of make our own decisions and investigate them back. And that's like this third step. First phase is finding out about aliens and UFOs. Second phase, characterizing them. Now phase 3, we, using these kinds of methods can actively investigate them, so that if they
and you become more independent, where you need less of a government, like a government to. It's when you're having these experiences, you're just so much more than anything that can even. You realize how everything that you ever thought before is totally backwards.
It's like you're probably, it's like in that movie K-Pax, where Kevin Spacey, the kind of the alien, says that that every living being in the universe knows the difference between right and wrong, and suggests that on his alien planet there was not really much of a government because everybody already knew the difference between right and wrong, and they're already essentially checking on each other, and they're just cooperating. It's a shared common good kind of thing. And that's
true, and the reason why these verdants are able to do this is because humans in the so-called are kind of infantile stages still, and are just now coming into the acknowledgement of their spiritual self. Even though thousands of years ago we were more spiritual, where we had these different senses, we kind of lost that, and we're getting back to that way now.
Well, you can see what makes people sort of get stuck in this little box. For example, people say, oh, it's about what you get for yourself. Think about your own little house and what you can, just hoard on your own. Don't think about the rest of society, and it's about how the economy goes and these weird dinosaurs that are trying to, steal what they can for themselves. And it's all very frustrating, and it reduces the mind, and it actually makes us less intelligent, where in the story, an account you can read free on the web, it's called Contact with Iarga, describes a planet called IARGA, Iarga. And they say that in their kind of shared, which is more or less an equalitarian society, which is apparently a standard among every single alien population we know of, they all share more or less equally within their population. In that circumstance, they live better. It's though they suggested, for example, to the Dutchmen that they contacted, they said, well, you don't want to go out, maybe in your planet you wouldn't want to say, let's go out and destroy these elites, which is going to cause nothing but more conflict, but, go out and advocate that we take all these poorer people and bring all of them up to a better standard where we all live well. And, no violence, no conflict, and who can argue with that?
Well, everybody gets on an even playing field. There is no elites. If we all have the same knowledge and the same, system, and also the same education or whatever, we all have. There is no elite. So the more of us that awaken and have these experiences, it kind of lessens the elite's hold and control over us, which they're fighting desperately now for.
Yeah, it's very liberating. When you're interacting in a larger scale, and when you feel free, it's like you can be out further in the larger sense. I mean, the universe is all, in the weird science, the physics of the universe, they aren't whole number quantities. There's not the whole number one me and the whole number one atom here. They're all fractions of the whole big universe from the very beginning to the very ends of time. And that is exactly how the physics and the science works. Instant resonance across, determined by the whole universe, not by just what the nearest little box is next to you. So in a sense, that sort of fractional sort of resonance back and forth is the basis for this kind of communication. And the point is that you feel that larger involvement. You literally feel it. There's a much greater awareness. And you feel like, wow, I mean, it's not only interesting to be able to communicate with more people here on this planet that way, but all of a sudden you feel that we're going to learn a lot more very quickly once we begin to do so, because it's as if we've opened the door to the communications and the ideas of all of these other societies. And
yeah, and like you said, there's no more secrets. You can't hide anything anymore.
Yeah,
because we all know everything.
It's liberating in a sense. It also poses some challenges because, there's some people that would think, we've got this downed alien technology. We can read minds, but they might want to use that just for greed and for power and control in the early stages. And the challenge for us is to liberate that, or to somehow, even if we can't get our hands anywhere near that technology, is to educate the public to know that here's what you have to watch out for. We can already 1,000 times more exceed whatever they have in terms of gizmos just using our minds. And we can, it's like, you've got people building a $16 billion telescope, and they're trying to figure out if there may be bacteria on one of those planets, say 50 light years out, and you can sit in your room right where you are now, and in the process of hours or maybe a few days, you can be doing remote sensing, checking these kind of things on your own. You have to.
And it's funny, no matter what they throw at us to try, because that's not that if you believe it or not, but the elite or the powers are trying to hit us with different things. So we're not, but they have, our spiritual, our consciousness is so beyond what they're trying to stop it from being. Whatever they're trying to do to us is not working, because we're so beyond this 3D self. So they're using 3D technology and 4 or 5D to try to keep us in our bodies, not for us to be aware, to keep us zombies, so they can continue to have control because they like that control. But they don't realize these humans, no matter what they throw at us, we can go beyond that.
It's like I was saying to the caller, our friend in England, is the moment you start doing this, you're essentially interacting in a 5th dimension. You are extra dimensional, and some people are thinking, what do you mean by another dimension? Well, it's a larger sort of space. It's a little bit deeper inward in the sense of like where the atom is, and it's also resonating in a larger sense at the same time. The universe is a big extra dimension, also in the same sense, but ultimately this kind of stuff goes on essentially on a universal scale. It's not like you can immediately compute all of that in your head, but it's the basis. The science for it is something like a universal sort of huge sort of network that's built into your surroundings, and somehow it's connected. Some people are thinking, how could it be connected? Well, it's because there's a slightly deeper basis around you. The atom sort of looks like a door in the nucleus down into that, and some people don't understand that yet, but it's this kind of, it's really, there is connectedness in and across the universe. It's just fascinating. I mean, it so changes the way you think when you start to step into this. But what I was going to say is that, so here, people that step into this are essentially moving into another dimensional kind of existence. And you hear some people saying it's like a lower density or higher density. And what they mean by higher density is this. It's abductees. When they say they have interactions with aliens, they say, well, here's how it feels. One says, for example, one of John Mack's abductees, she was talking to him, and she was saying about how she felt like things, when she starts interacting with aliens, it feels like things are going inward in a sense. They're sort of folding, they're rolling inward, while at the same time, she's connected with the whole universe at the same time. Another one was saying, in a similar sense, it was like, I felt like, you're part of, you're in an infinitely tiny little spot, and yet you're somehow connected all the way out in a much bigger sense all at the same time. It's like, it's at the same time, it's like it's a higher density, like down in the denser sort of aspect of like a nucleus or in space, while it's resonating way, way out there. So people are going to have this sense of like, it's like a different kind of density, but at the same time, it's a huge, more airy, more sort of spatial or hyperspatial kind of plane way out there. And that's just that's how it is. That's this new, and this is what people are sort of, we are evolving into that. It's no longer the past. It's no longer what aliens do. Any one of the listeners can do this, any single one. If you're of sound mind, if you're able to just sort of clear your mind, you can do this. And it's the basis of alien societies, and it's going to change our science because, the science of how this works in terms of energy and information and so forth is very important.
I'm glad, George, that you expressed that everybody can do this. I say that every time on the show. I always leave them. We all have this ability. We can all do it. And
what's also interesting, too, is, for example, when you're doing this kind of remote sensing, one thing some people forget to mention, and you really need to remember this, is so you're doing remote sensing. So you can close your eyes and work on this. The Japanese call this Toshi, T-O-H space S-H-I. They've been doing this for centuries. They look into closed containers and see what's in there, not using their eyes. They're feeling with the nerve structure in their brains, or all the nerves that they have, and it's like different elements and different materials have different, spectra and different energy in a sense. It's real. It's science. It's not something fake. And so you could close your eyes, and if there was glass and metal and wood next to you, they would feel different to you the first time you try it. The next day when you do it, though, you have a memory for it and you'll recognize it better. But here's what I was getting at. Be sure to notice the difference between like those kind of materials and empty space, because when you're doing remote sensing way out there, a planet it resonates very differently from the empty space around it. A galaxy, too, you can resonate in a larger sense like that, or cross a large distance in space. And it's as though, this sounds weird, but scientists are suggesting the same. The idea of a quantum computer does exactly this. It's as though all of the information that exists can somehow already exists in like a virtual sense. Like it's partly there right next to you, but you just don't pick up on it. It's not like you can just pull it out all at once, but if you resonate across the distance, you'll sort of pull that out. So that's how you locate and recognize things. It helps to have a map. Like if you have a map in front of you and you know, here's Earth here, here's the Milky Way, over here's another galaxy, here are different planets, here's the big, 2,000 galaxies of the Virgo supercluster, because you're going to feel that. In remote sensing, you'll feel big difference between here's all this stuff and here's all this huge empty space, or here's this planet. It's as though you sort of sort through all of that all at once. It sounds strange, but the mind can easily do this. It's far beyond in the capacity of any computer, because it's like a quantum computer in a sense, but it's as though some people, they call it the Akashic record. The information is already embedded, in a sense, in the space-time around us, because the universe pulled out of the same context. It's all connected, in a sense, and that's that kind of resonance, which is why...
And for you to travel, it happens instantaneously. As soon as you have that thought map in your mind, and you're there.
Yeah, as long as you can do it. And some people are thinking, wow, like, it's like I'm a physical body. For me, it's not like so physical, but it's like you're right. It's like I'm right there, and you have to be careful about it. Like I was saying, so you wouldn't want to just sort of place yourself. So say there's an alien ship out there, maybe.
Yeah, you don't want to go in the ship but I've learned now. I've learned how to protect. I teach my people too how to protect themselves. I've learned I could go on their ship and I have no fear of going on their ship now. But I don't suggest everybody who just starts doing this to go and jump on their ship. Start in small doses. Start feeling around, knowing your surroundings, getting that gut instinct going, and experiment.
Yeah, because you know how to fend for yourself, because you've been doing this for quite some time. I'm the same way. I will investigate and will query. Actually, it's like a real fast, quick sort of check. The information is just, you resonate quickly across their whole big ship, find out who the suspects would be in a particular case, might even suggest to them that they're being checked on, and it's being communicated back to our population, that they don't have impunity.
Thank you, George. You could say that again, because this is important. This is how we win back our own control. We continue to stay independent from these elites. Can you repeat that again?
Yeah, so I'm a kind of I guess I don't know if they'd call me a troublemaker, but I've exposed quite a bit, and that I'm sure they find embarrassing. So I have to, it's like this. You're already out there, you're doing this, you realize that some people are not doing what needs to be done, so you do it, you check, you investigate, you find out, and your first impression may be, you know who it is, you know where they are, and then it's like this, you revisit it, once you do that, you know who they are, you can find them anytime you want to, then it's as though you sort of revisit that in a sense, it's as though you shake back and forth, but it's more instant resonance back and forth of the ideas to see how they respond. So you're testing them to see, did they do this, did they not, who knew, which ones, what did the command structure think, and what exactly is involved. And you're citing them. It's like saying, I live on this planet, I know this, I will report this to our people. You do not have the right and the impunity to do this, as if you can totally get away with it and there is no consequence. And
I bet you they're scared as hell of you when you come, not in a physical sense, because, and I always tell people, you don't have to physically harm them or anything. Just you knowing is enough.
I also put it like this. I say, I'm in contact. I don't tell them who. I suggest a larger context and point out that this can get back to your regime. This can get out to other populations, and you will never go. You cannot go anywhere to escape the consequences. Even if you don't see them immediately in your lifetime, the universe is such. It's almost as though they're like Tao-like, but real, and they can be physical, real world consequences in any mind that violates other people. It may be that they lump themselves in with the wrong kind, that they're stuck in that, and that becomes their fate. But sometimes you also want to suggest that we have ideas of laws here. Our neighbors have ideas of laws, and if you abduct, violate, manipulate, conflict, and you violate the ecology here, you will not escape the consequences, and they have to be aware of that. Even for some people, they're thinking like, wait, is this all real? I mean, it's that real. And if once you get to that point, say you have, it's a kind of a responsibility. It's you're investigating, you have analysis, and you can cite them. Sometimes it feels like you're playing the role of a prosecutor. You just don't have, a jail cell there. It's you have to sort of be very explicit, say what's going on, say why it's wrong to be doing A or B, say why they don't allow it in their society, why every single population around regards this as valid and something you cannot do. And sometimes they're very, very important issues that have to be addressed.
Well, George, we have 10 minutes. Is there any, you could talk about your upcoming books, your website, anything you want to promote or talk about?
Well, I'd just say, so you can read my book, Alien Mind, free if you want, or you can get it in paperback or Kindle, and its website.
And I just have a quick question. What made you give it out for free?
Well, I was getting so deep into the subject, and I could tell that no one else was explaining some of or delving into what I was doing, that I did not want to wait until I had the print version out. And I already had a guy in Hollywood, that's where he's located, it was somewhere in L.A., and he had a website, and he asked me to serialize it, so I put it on there, and it was already like, 2/3 of the way through the book free on chapters there. And then I developed my own website, and I realized the best way to get this everywhere across the globe is to just leave a free version out for people, so that nobody has to have $1 or wait for the thing to arrive in the mail. And so I just do that. And I
want to say thank you for it. I for everybody who's had download the book and gained some insight, I want to say thank you.
I think that really is the spirit. The interactions and the information. You'll hear me making quotes of actual aliens and very specific. And I hope you can see what I've seen, that there's an internal consistency, and you can see if you read the book, you'll see that I could never have made up what's in this book. It's just my mind just did not even go there, and the details, much of it is taken from other people, the best accounts I think of other people, and then when I make a direct quote by an alien, it's you can tell, I hope you can see that I am that how. Where that comes from, because it's very different beings, and it's real physical beings in those cases. And I think when they share information, they don't want it to be tied up in with a price tag only. They're thinking this is for you to share, and it's not just about you and your profits. In my case, the more people know about it, the faster, the sooner, the better. And the book comes later. Sure, if somebody wants that, it's like a luxury, but it's fun to take around. But I think the free version is very, very important. And the next one, I'll probably be doing something, the information, here I am. I'm halfway through this book. I have this information, and I know it's going to change the way some people think. And I've already serialized, put some of it in articles in Exopolitics Journal on Michael Sala's site. I sometimes go on a website and I'll put something out and just test what people think, how they respond to it, because like a how-to section. I just put it out there, and I realize it needs to be known.
You should have a donation. I know you don't. You should have a donation on your site for people that are enjoying the book and gaining some knowledge, so that they can give back. Since you've given a lot of your knowledge, your experiences, you should.
I'll say right now this. Here's the donation I would want from them is this: share the information with somebody else. Try it. See if you can do the kind of things that I coach people on how to do, and if you can, share that with other people. Spread the information, because the big responsibility is already upon us, and it's not just coming our way. We are already there, and once you sort of see that, it's like the whole subject of aliens. Probably before you knew about it, you might have thought, well, so what? This is weird. I don't care. It doesn't affect me. It's just fake. And then when you decide that it's real, you realize that it's so important that it tends to almost eclipse much of the other things that you might be doing. But actually, in the sense, it's like you're just seeing further. Over time, there's more to know about, more to do, and the thing is, you become much more capable. It's just you cannot compare the way your life was before compared to how it eventually becomes after when you actually try some of the techniques or some of the this kind of remote sensing.
When will you think the next book will be done, that people can look for it?
Well, I'm about almost at 100 pages now, and the further you get into it, the faster it goes because, it's just already pretty well formed. And I think probably within the year.
Within the year, will it be on the alienmindbook.org, or will it be on a different site?
Yeah, I haven't figured that out yet, but I'll be putting out publicity for it. And, I'll do a whole different round of different radio and appearances and so forth. So I'll definitely have a link to it on Alien Mind site. Right now, that first book is a good place to start. I would suggest this. If people, don't just read me. Read other people also. Read as much as you can, and you'll find the best stuff is very interesting and it helps. You read. Read physics too sometimes, the weird new physics. Get the easy to understand versions, and read about contacts, about different accounts about different aliens. The more you know, the better you'll be able to understand any of it, and you'll see your own patterns. You'll probably have ideas that nobody else has recognized because every mind works differently, and you might want to actively pursue that and help other people understand the things that are really ringing loudly in your mind.
And also, when you when you have these experiences, you start able to read other people's stuff, books, and you can kind of go through what is, good information, what's not so good, and you have a better knowledge then.
Hey, Retta.
Yeah.
Yes.
Caller from 205 area code just called back in. Do you want to bring him or her on real quick to see if you had something to add?
If she could do it, because I want to thank George very much for coming, and I want to put out his book again, alienmindbook.org, and this is George Lebono, and I really appreciate him coming in and talking to us today. If you have a quick question, area code 205, we only have a few minutes left.
Actually, Retta, I just called in to listen to the rest of the show, but I am the lady that you spoke with last week that had the reptilian eyes, that I was not understanding what they were about. So, just
okay, well, yes, I'll go into that again next week. I'll try to go into that a little bit further. I've done some type of own search in that regard. 205.
Retta sounds like she's like me. I have not had experiences with so-called reptilians. I
haven't.
I don't doubt that it's possible that they exist. I mean, why not, You can easily see where, evolution on some planets might simply go that direction. No big asteroid hit, and suddenly you've got a reptilian form. But what I would suggest is if they did occur, they would be civilized, and, they would not be tearing people's guts out or looking at us as food. They would be technological, thoughtful, maybe cooler emotionally. I don't know. I'm just guessing.
And it also could be tricks, manipulations. That's why. That's why investigating yourself helps so much, because you can kind of you can do a check and balance yourself. What's fake?
I think you're exactly onto what I'm onto. It's like I read Kathy O'Brien. Kathy O'Brien's like
I've read her book, Transformation of America.
And the second one, too. And she talks about reptilian themes coming up, and she mentions, like, William Bennett and Bush Sr. and some of these people. And then there's Dr. Suarigo. Well, I mean, these people, it seems like some of these people in what some people would call Illuminati, they want to project this reptilian theme to simply confuse people in that case. Now, I'm not saying that there's no such thing as reptilians out there, but they seem to use that in some weird way to intimidate and kind of throw people off. And so
I think so, too.
We have about 30 seconds left.
We have 30 seconds. Everybody, thank you very much, George. I appreciate, and hopefully when your new book comes out, you'll join us again. I really enjoyed having you. You're full of knowledge. You were a joy to talk to.
Thank you, George. You're welcome on the Type 1 radio, on any of the shows, whenever you want, mate. Take care.
And if you want to get in touch with me, I've got my email on the website. I always write people back. So
yes, you were quick. He's very quick. George, I appreciate you again. And everybody, I'll see you next week. This is the Astral Travel with Retta Also check out Type 1 Lounge on the weekends with Sonic. And also try out American Freedom Radio. Check out Freighter X. He has Lou Milo Duquette. He was the writer of Understanding the Aleister Crowley's Talk. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, George. Good night.